Hi everybody, and welcome to the Azure user group. Couple of quick announcements before I introduce tonight's speaker. Firstly, I am going to try to set up an event for anybody that's interested in Azure Purview, which is a fantastic new service. Relating to data governance, data management, data cataloging, and I'm going to send that out. It's probably going to be for the beginning of January now, given Christmas and the times. So I will post this, give you all enough time to make some plans. Be a really, really good session. We'll try and get somebody from Microsoft to do this. Then also, we're running a hack. Microsoft are going to be sponsoring us with Azure credits, which is great because it's a data science hack on sustainable finance. So we've got some data providers, data brokers. We're running that in the middle of January. So if any of you are interested in like the subject of sustainable finance, ESGs, these sorts of things, we're going to have a great hack. You can subscribe. You can come to the event just by registering through the meetup page, and there'll be lots of finance experts, prizes galore, all of these sorts of things. Be a fun weekend. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to Kieran, who's our Microsoft speaker of the night. As promised, we are almost a year since we did the first Azure Sentinel talk. We had a big attendance there. We did it across two user groups, the UK Azure user group and the Cloud Infrastructure user group, and it was packed. Kieran tonight, I'll let him introduce himself. He's going to be talking about Azure Sentinel 1 year on, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Brilliant, thank you, Richard. So it's nice to meet everyone, and thank you very much for hosting me this evening. I'm Kieran. My role at Microsoft is known as a Global Black Belt, which is an incredibly grand job title for a far less grand role. What my role is on a day-to-day basis is I work with our product groups that build pretty much every product that you see on the screen as part of our Microsoft Threat Protection portfolio. And essentially I work as a bit of a liaison with customers in the UK and Europe predominantly that are looking to adopt these products, to bring them roadmap information about the direction we're taking our products, but also to collect feedback and insight to help shape that roadmap so that we're building the stuff that you guys want to be using. Now, obviously, our topic of conversation tonight is Azure Sentinel, and I said a happy first birthday, though we're probably about a month and 2 weeks past the birthday of Azure Sentinel now. But Azure Sentinel is still a very young product in terms of the Microsoft portfolio and in terms of the SIEM portfolio more generally. So myself and Richard thought it'd be really good to give you an update on not just what the product is capable of, but where it's evolved over the last year, and also to give you a little bit of an insight into some of the plans for what we hope the product to evolve into before it turns 2 in just 10 short months' time. So I promise this is the only slide that I'm going to show today. I don't want to bore you to death with PowerPoint like so often Microsoft presentations are. Instead, I'm going to spend the majority of the session walking through the Azure Sentinel portal using a demo environment I have access to with some dummy data in to give you an idea about how this all works and all fits together, and some of the new features and capabilities that are being brought to bear. But just before we do, just to set the scene, and I know there has been a little bit of a confusion in the community, and a little bit of a questioning around some of the name changes we've maybe done with our products recently. So I've just popped this slide up to set the scene across the entire Microsoft Threat Protection portfolio, with Azure Sentinel obviously sitting at the top as our next generation SIEM and SOAR platform. And then sitting below that, we have our Microsoft 365 Defender, and this is what's recently changed name. This is the suite of products: Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365, and Cloud App Security that form part of the SaaS protection that Microsoft has available across identities, endpoints, data, email, and cloud applications. You probably knew these products previously under the name of ATP, either Defender ATP or Office ATP. And the question that's been going around is, this suite of products and this Defender 365 looks and smells a little bit like a SIEM solution. So where does this fit with Azure Sentinel? Where does this fit with the Microsoft threat strategy and the threat protection strategy? And the answer is one of the strategic directions that we see the security industry moving is having these layers of automation and layers of intelligence built into the tooling that bring raw logs together and provide an overview and provide insight onto those logs before we ingest them into a SIEM solution. Now, you might see this around the industry being known as an XDR solution, and this is what the Microsoft 365 layer provides. Now, what it doesn't provide is it doesn't provide a large amount of customization, and it doesn't provide the ability to correlate with sources outside of this environment. So sources like your Azure Defender, recently renamed from Azure Security Center, or third-party data sources like on-premise data sources, network appliances, firewall logs. So if there's any confusion, or if anyone out there was seeing this Microsoft 365 Defender and wondering, was this another SIEM? Was it different from a SIEM? This diagram hopefully will help clear up how we see the flow. Microsoft 365 Defender is a layer of automation and a layer of intelligence that we can apply on top of those different work streams before we ingest those highly rich correlated alerts into Azure Sentinel for use elsewhere across your threat protection, across the environment. So without further ado, I'm going to close down this presentation and move us into a much more interesting topic of the Azure Sentinel portal itself. So just bringing this up on screen. So this is the Azure Sentinel homepage, and for those of you who looked at this a year ago, this landing page hasn't changed much over the last year. We've been focusing on developing each of the blades individually and bringing new experiences and new capabilities to bear across the product. So I'm actually going to start with the data connectors, because any SIEM solution is only as good as the data that you're feeding into it. And the first thing that I think you'll note here is the huge number of data connectors that we now have available, a dramatically increased amount since when we launched last year. We've been working very hard to make sure that third-party vendors, third-party security solutions, if they have a direct API that we can be interfacing with, or if they need a specific configuration, that we have these available, and we have these in the interface as part of our connectors. So if we pick something like the F5 Big IP, we can see here when I go to the connectors page, that not only do I have the connector pre-built and available in the environment, but it would give me, if I wasn't in a demo environment, it would give me my workspace ID and my primary key ready to copy and paste out into my F5 Big IP appliance. And it even gives me a link out to the relevant documentation, in this case on the F5 side, of how to do that integration with Azure Sentinel. So the aim being with our data connectors that we want to make this as seamless as possible, as easy to get started with onboarding the data, and to take away a lot of that pain that can come with getting a SIEM solution up and running, of configuring collectors or deploying virtual machines out into your environment to do that data collection. Now, obviously, this isn't always possible. And some appliances might be just too legacy, too nuanced, or too bespoke for us to have a connector here. And in that case, we still have capability to use common event format, syslog format, whatever format you may find in that appliance to actually get that data into Azure Sentinel. But even for these, we try and give you as much guidance as we can and as much help with getting them set up, right the way from providing scripted commands to run to actually get the virtual machine, the collector machine you need set up and configured to help you get those events into Azure Sentinel as soon as possible. Now, possibly one of the biggest hidden gems that isn't actually listed on this data connectors page is that you don't actually even need to use a pre-built connector at all if you want to get your data into Azure Sentinel. And there's two routes you have that aren't shown here that are both open to you to get data from a more complex source into Azure Sentinel. And the first of those is Logstash. So many of you will have come across Logstash in terms of open source pipeline that is used in things like the Elk stack. For Azure Sentinel, there is a Logstash output plugin that has the ability to pipe that data from your Logstash pipeline directly into the log analytics workspace, which Azure Sentinel is running on top of. So this means you have the capability for any data source you can read in through Logstash to be potentially even pre-processed in that Logstash pipeline before it is input into your Azure Sentinel environment. And that's a huge amount more flexibility and a huge amount more different data sources and types that you can bring into Azure Sentinel. And then the final one is the data API for log analytics. And this is a way that you can programmatically, through the API, actually push data into the log analytics workspace. This can be really useful if, let's say, you are looking at AWS data. Now, we have a pre-built connector for the CloudTrail logs from AWS, but you'll notice that there are many other log sources, maybe your guard duty logs, that you want to bring in from AWS that we don't have a pre-built integration for yet. And one of the best ways to do this is by using that data API, either using something like a Lambda function on the AWS side, or using an Azure function on the Azure side to read that data from the S3 bucket that might be logging to before it can then be pushed into the data API and ingested into Azure Sentinel. So suffice to say, there are a plethora of different options of getting that data in, and this has been an area we've really focused on expanding over the last year because we heard the feedback from our users loud and clear that they loved what they could do with Azure Sentinel, but they wanted more data from more different sources available and easy to ingest into Azure Sentinel. And without giving anything away too much, we do have a whole load more improvements that we're planning for the next sprint. So our next sprint starting in January for 6 months, we are still focusing on this data ingestion challenge and looking at how we can provide the ability to access more different APIs when maybe we don't necessarily know what the API is going to be because it's a bespoke or a custom API that you have that maybe no one else in the world does. And also the ability to do more normalization on that data as it's coming in to make the data that we're bringing in far more usable in Azure Sentinel than it even is today. So watch this space, lots more coming over the next few months around these data connectors. So moving forward, I'm not going to dwell on the log screen, just in case we have anyone on the call that is less familiar with Azure Sentinel. Everything in Azure Sentinel is built upon KQL and KQL queries, such as the one that I've just quickly picked out and run here, where we are querying one of the various tables that we may have available in our Azure Sentinel instance and returning back when my instance decides to wake up, returning back hopefully some results. In this case, I'm just done a quick query on the sign-in logs and looking for anywhere where I've got failures on my conditional access policy. Well, there's no results in the last 24 hours in my demo environment. But either way, I'm not going to dwell on that too much. What I did want to signpost is if there's anyone out there that feels slightly uncomfortable or isn't as experienced with KQL, we do have a free course online hosted by Pluralsight that allows you to get started with learning how to write in this query language. And this is my biggest piece of advice is if you're going to get started with Azure Sentinel, everything you see and everything you're going to see tonight is built on top of KQL queries. And this is really the lifeblood of Azure Sentinel and any Azure Log Analytics solution. So getting started and learning how to write these queries is possibly the single biggest thing you could do to help make your experience and your understanding of how Azure Sentinel is working as strong as possible. So I'm jumping around the portal a little bit to try and help make this make sense. We're going to move on to the hunting blade and have a look here next. So the first thing you may have noticed when you arrived in the hunting blade a year ago was that we had a small sample, a small selection of pre-built queries. This has been rapidly evolving, and you'll see that we have hundreds of these pre-built queries today to help you with proactively hunting across your data. To understand what's going on and maybe start to look for those anomalies that you need to investigate further. Now, some improvements we've made, we've added the MITRE ATT&CK framework categorization. So we know that a lot of security operations teams really like the ATT&CK framework for categorizing and for looking across their data and understanding what they're looking at. So each of the queries that we populate and any of your own queries you add into this interface as well, you can assign them to one or more MITRE ATT&CK categories. And then we can filter the queries and say, actually, I'm only interested in, say, the initial access vector right now, and filter back the queries that are available to show us only those that have been marked as part of the initial access tactics. And one of my favorite features that was there a year ago, but remains one of my favorite features today, is the ability to actually go and execute all of the queries I have saved, or all the queries I have shown here in parallel, and see if there are any results to help me as an analyst know where I want to start looking today. We've added some other filters, so the ability to filter by data source. So in my case, I've just got the Office activity table selected here because that's the data source I'm interested in. But also the ability to filter by provider, as we're now having these queries added and built by other partners that we're working with in the security space, other partners that have worked with us on those data connectors as well. Now, one area that was not available a year ago was the ability to do what we call a live stream. And the easiest way to think about this is it's a query that's running in real time every second across your data set, and you'll see an ever-changing set of results whilst this query is running. So if I hit play here, now hopefully I don't see anything appearing in this because this is just a demo environment and I really shouldn't have any rare audit activity initiated by a user in my demo environment tonight. But what's now happening behind the scenes is this is now running, and this query is being run every second or so, and the results would be being displayed below in this panel here for me. Now, this is really useful if I'm working on a query and maybe need to make tweaks or changes to a query, or if I'm in the middle of an investigation and I want to be triggered, I want to see as soon as a particular indicator that I've written a query for fires as part of my investigation. Maybe I'm tracking a malicious actor that could be moving in real time across my environment. And the other really useful thing is that we can actually take this query and this live data that we're seeing and either promote it into an analytics rule and say, actually, I've maybe built a query, I've looked for something, I've finished this work, but I now want that to happen or as part of my ongoing analytics, my ongoing alerting I'm having, promote it to analytics rule or add it as a bookmark. And bookmarks are a really interesting concept in Azure Sentinel. So bookmarks are a way which we can store pieces of data that we've come across or that we've found as part of an investigation to either be shared with other teammates and colleagues that may be doing an investigation, or actually acted on in the same way that an incident or an alert that the tool had generated for us would be. So if I'm working through and I find a set of data or a set of results that I want to go and promote then to do an investigation or run some automation off the back of, a bookmark is how I can do this. And this goes the other way as well. Maybe I've started an investigation from an alert that I've had triggered, and I've run some more queries. I've looked into it a little bit more and found some more evidence I want to associate with that incident. And bookmarks is how we would do that as well. We would bookmark the evidence and attach it to the incident that we were investigating. We can either attach it to an existing incident, or we can create a new incident directly from that bookmark. So this allows us to not only have a set of results, but have a set of notes that we can add to and amend to associated with a particular set of results, as well as to pull the entities out of those results. And I'll talk a little bit more about entities later on. And finally, the other feature we've added is the ability to have tags, both on incidents, but also on bookmarks that are associated with those incidents as well. So perhaps I want to tag this as related to a particular case, or tag this as something suspicious, and I can add and edit those tags as I work with these bookmarks and add them on for either my colleagues or for myself to be able to quickly filter and sort by later. If I want to only find, let's say, the incidents that are the bookmarks, sorry, that are related to case 1, 2, 3, 4, I can then filter the bookmarks on that tag and have return back, in this case, just the one, but the one bookmark that was tagged as such. So lots of effort and lots of development in just this one blade of the hunting pane itself. I'm not going to spend any more time on this because I think it leads us quite nicely on to how we've developed our analytic rules. So analytic rules, for those that have not come across them before, are the way we do alerting in Azure Sentinel. And at a high level, an analytic rule is a KQL query that runs at a particular frequency over a particular set of data, and then triggers an alert if there is a certain criteria, say more than 0 results returned. Now, when we first launched Azure Sentinel, we had a very basic alerting capability and a very basic automation that could happen off the back of that. But we had a much bigger vision of what we wanted to do with our analytics. And part of that vision was moving from a world where we are focusing on individual alerts to a world where Azure Sentinel is combining these alerts into incidents that are much more richly correlated, that maybe contain 2, 4, 8, 16 or more alerts that are linked together in some way, to allow our analysts to have more data at their fingertips as soon as they open an incident, rather than having to manually work out what that link is and the correlation from a whole series of alerts that were presented. And the way we do this is by using what we call our entities. So the ability to have a query and to actually map the resulting columns from that query to entities is what powers a lot of the correlation engine that's within Azure Sentinel. So here I've got a particular query. I could take this and say, okay, well, maybe this particular one I've picked at random doesn't happen to have an account, but I could say maybe that this particular column, the grant operation column, maybe that contains the account name. And this is the column that I want to be mapped to my account type of entity, so that you can correlate on accounts that maybe are flagged in one alert to accounts flagged in another alert. And we've built this out to most recently include URL entities and also file hash entities as well. And we continue to look at what new entities we can add on and how we can build this entity list to allow for more correlation in different ways across your alerts. And the other thing that we have is how we actually then use those entities to do the correlation. So if I look at the incident settings here, you can see that I can either choose to create incidents from this rule or not create incidents. Because it might be that we have a particular rule that's quite noisy. We don't want every single alert that comes from that rule to be created into an incident, but we do want them to be stored in our alerts table so that they are available for correlation with other alerts that maybe make it relevant to become an incident. And this is where this alerts grouping piece comes in. So if I turn this on, I can actually set granular rules around how I want my alerts to be grouped together into those incidents. So maybe I want to only group within a certain time period. So I'm only interested in if it's within 5 hours of another alert, pulling that into the same incident. And maybe I want to only group it if all of the entities match. So if I've defined, say, an account, a machine, and a file hash, I want all three of those things to match before I group it. Or perhaps it's a little bit of a looser grouping. Maybe it's an anti-malware alert that I've got coming in, and actually, as long as the file hash is the same, it's relevant for me to know, regardless of the account or the machine that's in the other alert entities as well. And you can set and you can configure this on a per alert, per analytic basis, so that your different analytics may be grouped in different ways based on what they're looking at or what they're actually doing. And then finally, the other area we have massively changed things since a year ago is around our automated response. So if we're thinking about that bigger picture, if we want to move away from thinking about alerts and move towards thinking about incidents, our automated response was a little bit limited when we first launched, in that you could trigger it automatically based off an alert. But if you had an incident that maybe had 3 or 4 really useful, richly correlated alerts, there was no way to trigger automation at the incident level. And this is something we've now changed. We've actually added, I don't have one here, but we've added a new trigger kind of Azure Sentinel incident to allow you to say, actually, this automation playbook, I don't want it to run on each alert. I only want it to run at the incident level, because maybe it's going to take information from 3 or 4 alerts, or maybe it's going to do something with every single alert in that incident, to allow us to actually move the automation layer from the alerts to the incidents, so that we can have automation at whatever layer it makes sense for the actual analytic we're writing. So before I continue, I'm just going to pause for a second to go and have a look in the Q&A. Please do write questions into the Q&A as we go through. I'm happy to take them as we go live, because very often they'll make more sense for whatever we're looking at that point, rather than coming back and revisiting it at the end. So I don't see any questions that need answering right now, but please do keep posting them through. And if you've got any questions or any feedback on what you're seeing, I would love to be able to see that and answer them as we go through. So coming back into the portal then, the next area we've done a whole load of work, and we're continuing to do work, is on the actual incidents themselves. And when we launched Azure Sentinel, we had a very limited experience in terms of investigating incidents. We had a very rudimentary workflow that you could use to actually manage those incidents. And this is something that we've developed a lot over the last year. So firstly, before I even dive into any of the incidents here, we've developed Azure Sentinel now so that if you are in a situation where you maybe have more than one tenant or more than one instance of Azure Sentinel, maybe you're a partner wanting to work with multiple customers, or you have multiple parts of your business that operate independently, you can actually use Azure Lighthouse to access and manage those Azure Sentinel instances across multiple different tenants. And with our incident view, you could actually get this same view that you're seeing here, that's within just one Sentinel instance, if I can get my words out, to see incidents that are coming from multiple Sentinel instances. And the way you do that is, if I jump back, you can see I've gone to my Azure Sentinel workspace here, and I have multiple different workspaces. I can actually select more than one of them and click View Incidents to see that incident view from all of those workspaces combined. So if I'm a SOC analyst working to protect 2 or 3 different environments, I don't have to start my day looking at each of the environments to work out which one I want to start with. I can start in a single view, see what's happening across all of the environments, see which environment each of these incidents comes from, and decide where I'm going to start my day. Now I'm going to jump back out and go just into that one workspace, because in this demo environment, I only have data in this one workspace that's of relevance to us. But it's worthwhile noting that we have massively increased that capability for cross-workspace management and cross-workspace incidents. I do see I've just got a question that's popped in the chat that says, how is it licensed? Is it based on events or capacity? And the answer is kind of neither. So the way that you pay for Azure Sentinel is on data ingested. This isn't events ingested, this is actual gigabytes of data ingested. So you, if you've say got a solution, you've connected up the streaming data to Azure Sentinel, it's ingesting 20 gigabytes a day, you'll pay 20 times the 1 gigabyte per day price. You do have the ability to reserve capacity or reserve ingestion. So if I knew that I was going to be ingesting 100 gigabytes a day, I can actually reserve 100 gigabyte a day ingestion, and I'll get a big discount on that up front. And then if I went over that at all, that just goes back to the pay-as-you-go rate. So you can ingest 102, 103, or however many gigabytes you want. That first 100 you've already prepaid for in your reservation, and then the extra is just charged in addition. So there's no data caps or data limits in that sense. So if you suddenly have a big spike in an event, you don't have to worry that data will be truncated because you've not paid for enough capacity. But it will always scale to meet your needs. This is one of the best bits about it sitting in the cloud is I have customers I'm working with that are throwing terabytes of data a day at Azure Sentinel, and Microsoft take responsibility for scaling that back end. We don't need the customer to scale or to say we're going to ramp up by 10% next month for us to scale in the back end. It's all a software as a service solution, and will scale as you scale your needs. And the other bit that's probably worthwhile calling out on costing is that once you've paid to ingest that data, there's no charge for the analytics or the analysis that you're going to do on that data. The only point we charge is where you ingest the data, and then if you want to retain the data for longer than 90 days, there is a per day per gigabyte charge for that retention. But when you're using the data, if you're running one query or 1,000 queries, there's no difference. That's all included in the solution itself. So hopefully that answers the question around costing. There are a number of different nuances with the costing as well. So there's some various offers. There is some data you can actually ingest for free from the Microsoft solutions, like from that Defender 365 solution I was mentioning earlier. You can ingest alerts from that for free, but without going into any of the nuances, because I'm sure that nobody wants me to spend the next hour talking about Microsoft licensing. But there's a lot of information available online for that, and that's the headline cost that you'll have with this solution is around data ingestion and the data retention if you need to retain it for longer than 90 days. So coming back into the incident screen, one of the biggest pieces we've been working on and developing is around our actual investigation experience for the analyst. So we've mentioned before these entities, and actually if I go to the full details of this incident I've picked out, what you'll actually see is that we extract out the entities from all of the alerts that are involved in the incident. So you can see here this one has got 5 alerts, each with a number of entities. And I can pull those entities out, and there's 3 IP addresses, and that was what correlated these alerts together into the same incident. I can see any bookmarks that I may have added that relate to this incident, and in any comments that the analysts might make. If I leave a comment here, we can see that we would have the ability for analysts to leave comments and to work on an incident collaboratively. In a similar way, we have the ability to assign an incident maybe to myself, and to mark the incidents as high, low, medium severity, change that severity, change the status of the incident. A full incident management workflow that you would expect. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that this comments field is actually a full HTML field. So you can add rich HTML data into these comments as well. One of the improvements we are looking to bring is we're actually looking to give you a HTML editor that allows you and makes it a bit more obvious that you can use the HTML tags in this comment field, and then it will all be rendered in the display underneath. This allows, if you want to bring a little bit more structure to comments, maybe leveraging tables was quite a big ask from customers, so they can work on incidents in a little bit more of a standardized way across different tool sets. But the real coup de creme is around our investigation experience here. And this experience is something we are still iterating on and we are still building on top of, but it allows a really graphical investigation of a particular alert or a particular incident. So here we have the time series anomaly. Let me zoom a little bit so that you can see this a bit better, hopefully. We have the time series anomaly that we initially triggered the alert from, and the other 4 that were linked to it by the incident. We have the IP addresses that are involved, and we can see these IP addresses are either involved in other alerts, in other linked incidents, and we can start to do our investigation across this. Now, this one I picked is not particularly interesting, but if there was more depth needed to be done, we can go and run queries like find all the hosts that are associated with a particular IP address, or find all of the other entities that are related to a particular incident through a single click with this interface, allowing for a much more graphical way of exploring an incident and its related entities than you can with the log screen itself. And it's important to note that all of those insights that we may be getting off an entity, they're just using a KQL query under the hood. So at any point when we are investigating an incident, we can always go directly to the logs that have maybe come from that underlying incident. We can see here on the left-hand side an overview of the particular alert, but I could just as easily dive out into the query that's actually generated that incident. I can see what query here has generated it and go and click on that and run it and get back to the raw logs should I wish to. And we can also pick any alert or any entity off that screen and dive straight into our playbooks, our automation, and choose a playbook to go and run, feeding that playbook the details from the alert. So I've picked an IP there when I dived out. Maybe I want to go and run this get IP reputation playbook, and I could click run to go and start that automation to get me more details as the analyst around the alert or the IP address that I'm looking at. So I've just noticed we've got another question popped in around, can we integrate Sentinel with third-party SOAR tools? If so, any examples? I don't have an example with me today around integration with other third-party SOAR tools, but let's say you had, I don't know, a Demisto or another SOAR tool that you wanted to integrate it with. You can very easily do that using a couple of different methods. So firstly, if you're wanting to get at the actual alerts that are coming out of Azure Sentinel, you could integrate it from the third-party tool side to read the Microsoft Security Graph API and actually get to the Azure Sentinel alerts. They're all published there through the Security Graph API. Or you can actually use Logic Apps and the automation engine that's in Sentinel to go and trigger that other SOAR tool. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at the different capabilities of Logic Apps today, but there's a whole variety of capability there to go and trigger using either an API call or trigger using a piece of arbitrary code, maybe running as an Azure function, or trigger using one of our built-in connectors in Logic Apps that we have for a variety of third-party tools, a separate playbook or a separate piece of automation to go and run. And as part of that integration with Logic Apps, we obviously can retrieve back any of the details from the incident, but also any of the underlying relevant logs from the raw logs that might be needed to pass on to that third-party SOAR tool to actually enable it to run whatever playbook or whatever automation needs to be run. So changing topic ever so slightly and coming back to our homepage, there are a few of these preview features that are now available in public preview that I wanted to highlight. And the first one of these is watch lists. So one of the capabilities we heard a lot of customers asking for was the ability to manage lists of data that maybe change on a more frequent basis, maybe a watch list of IP addresses or a VIP users list, that they could then use in their queries and their analytics. And this capability was always available using our external data operator in KQL. So this allows you to query data that sits outside of your Azure Log Analytics environment. and actually bring that data in. So that could be a CSV file, or it could be a text file of some kind that you bring in as structured data into your query to use. But we've actually just built a capability for this into Azure Sentinel because it was such a popular and feature. So you can now add watch lists. You can upload a file, a CSV file, as this, and manage this watch list here. You can provide that watch list with an alias, which you can then use in your queries when you maybe want to say cross-correlate. Do I see this particular IP address that's been triggered in my alert? Actually make it a high severity alert if it overlaps with my known bad IP address list. And this leads me on to the other preview feature that I wanted to talk about, which was around threat intelligence and the ability to both consume feeds of threat intelligence that you may have, maybe a Stix or a taxi server that you already are using to bring threat intelligence into your security platforms, or to perhaps add some threat intelligence of your own. A piece of custom threat intelligence, maybe a file value or an IP address. And this interface and this capability that we're building out in Azure Sentinel is really moving Azure Sentinel towards being a threat intelligence platform, a tip in its own right, with the ability to both ingest and leverage threat intelligence feeds, as well as manage the full life cycle of that threat intelligence within the Azure Sentinel platform, and in the future maybe look at feeding that onto other platforms as well. So this is the early days. There's a lot of work still to be done on our threat intelligence capabilities, but we do have this in preview now for you to go and use and to leverage in your Azure Sentinel instances today. And then the last piece that I really wanted to touch on was our user entity behavior analytics. So this has been a goal of the Azure Sentinel team to bring more of these entity behavior analytics to the Azure Sentinel platform as fast as we can. And we have available our basic entity behavior investigation experience, and also in preview our more enhanced entity behavior analytics as well. And what this allows you to do is to really, rather than starting your investigation from a particular log source or a particular alert, to change the pivot and to start your investigation around an entity. So perhaps a user or a machine. So I'm going to pick on poor old Megan here, who seems to be the brunt of most of our demos in Microsoft, and to actually say to Azure Sentinel, show me everything you know around this user. So be that, give me information around maybe what do you know about the Azure Active Directory objects? Is there any SIDs associated with this user in the on-premise directory? Show me all of the, not only the alerts, but also log information like sign-in log or office activity that you know is associated with this particular user. Give me a timeline of alerts and important activities that I can look at, in this case just the one. So I understand more about what this user is doing. And if there's any of these insights you can provide me, so do we see an anomalous operation in terms of a high value of office operations in this case? So normally Megan's doing 0, and in this particular case we see there's suddenly a spike to 3 office operations within a period of time. Now this is a very crafted, curated scenario in this demo environment, obviously, but these insights to maybe whether there's been an unusual amount of additions to other groups, or event logs being cleared by the user from devices. There's lots of these potentially insights that we can give you from the data that aren't necessarily in their own right going to trigger an alert. But when you start to look at this as a picture of an entity, we can provide a lot more context around what's going on, and maybe some of these insights warrant your security team to go and follow up and do a more detailed investigation on them. Now, I'm very conscious that I think Richard is probably going to pull me off the stage at any moment as I'm running maybe a little bit over on time. And I wanted to make sure I left some time to answer any more questions that people had. So please do go ahead and get them written into the chat for me to answer live now. But I just wanted to finish by saying that there is a huge amount which Azure Sentinel has grown in its first year of life. And it is going to continue to grow a huge amount more. I work with a number of different product groups across Microsoft, and hands down, the Azure Sentinel product group has been one of the most active and reactive to feedback customers have been giving them over the last year. So please do keep providing that feedback. You can provide that feedback directly within the Azure Sentinel portal itself. If you go up to this little feedback button here, and submit either a frown or a smile, the Azure Sentinel team are reviewing that on a weekly basis, and do reach back out to customers that provide that feedback if there's a new feature which would solve the challenge they're looking at, or the scenario that they've said they are unhappy with, or if it's a positive feedback, it lets them know what features customers are enjoying, and what features they should be continuing to build and develop further, because they're the features our customers are using. So please do use that feedback to give us that real-time view on what you're thinking of Azure Sentinel. So at that point, I'm going to hand back over to Richard to see if there's any questions we can answer. I'm going to leave you with a slide which is a bit of an eye chart, so I'm going to just pop it up on the screen. For anyone who hasn't seen this before, if PowerPoint's going to play ball for me, this is possibly the most CPU intensive slide I've ever loaded into PowerPoint. But it is a single view of the entire Microsoft security solution. It's our cybersecurity reference architecture. It is available online, and I would encourage you to have a look at it. And Azure Sentinel is fitting into the puzzle very nicely. I will leave you to find where that sits on the slide, but it's going to be up here. It's not called out by name, but it's part of the SIEM and analytics platform. So with that, thank you, Richard. I do appreciate the invite to come and speak today. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them and answer them now, or we can pick them up offline at a later point.
Thanks, Kieran. Fantastic talk. Just as you promised, very, very fast-paced and demo heavy. Very fluid. I love the visuals of the graph. I've seen that before, but I don't use it, but I think I will now, because it seems to be a really, really good way to drill into entities. Just to sort of kickstart the questions, I had a couple. In your experience, how do you, after, and we spoke about this, and this is a very broad question, we spoke about this earlier, but how would you prime a customer who has been using core capabilities in SIEMs like ArcSight? What things would you have to do to get them ready for Sentinel, for a more cloud-ready approach to security SIEM?
Yeah, it is a very broad question, and I think I would kind of bucket it into different stages of their adoption of a cloud-native SIEM. So the first thing is that as we've already spoke about, the costing model is usually quite different from what they're used to on premise. And if they've got a SIEM solution where they are managing the infrastructure as well, and having to think about how they scale that, how they back that up, how they deal with disaster recovery, there's a whole load of headaches that might actually go away for them. But it does introduce new challenges and new thought processes that they'll need to go through when they think about designing it. So when they're thinking about designing it, well, thinking about really what data do they need to store, what data do they need to analyze? Because in my experience, lots of SIEM solutions have evolved over time rather than been planned and deployed all up front. And very often we have lots of data in those SIEM solutions that actually we might be keeping for compliance reasons rather than for analytic reasons. And definitely when we're in that scenario, we have data that we want to keep for compliance reasons. Azure Sentinel, Azure Log Analytics can be a really expensive platform to store that data in. It's a great place to have very rapid querying over hugely large data sets. But if you're not going to leverage that functionality because you're just storing the data for a compliance reason, storing it into Azure Blob or something similar is probably a far more cost-effective solution. So that change in mentality from okay, I need to store everything, but where do I need to store it? Do I need to actually analyze this, or maybe do I just need to be able to get to it once a year if I get a subject access request? And you know what? Using the external data operator to pull the data in from an Azure Blob, the extra few seconds that's going to take, the extra time to craft the query, that's probably worth the saving in cost. So from a planning and an architecture point of view, that's what I would say is that the first step. And the second step is customers that have existing SIEM solutions probably have a large wealth of analytic rule or queries or analysis they do in their SIEM that they want to think about how they can migrate over. And some of this stuff is maybe legacy and maybe needs to be just removed because it's not relevant anymore. But some of the stuff will have had a lot of time and energy and be a lot of the value of the SOC team C and the SIEM tool. So being able to migrate that over easily is key, and being able to start with a lot of that content you might need pre-built is key as well. I mean, whilst we have, as I showed, a huge amount of content already available in Sentinel, being able to migrate this content over is a really key area for customers. And there's loads of our great partners out there that will help them do this. But one partner solution that I would highlight in actual anger is SOC Prime, who have a great library of free content that customers can use, and a great ability to, with additional paid content, bring more solutions, more queries, more rich insight into Azure Sentinel. You can deploy it straight from their website. It actually integrates with Sentinel for a single click. And the really valuable bit is they actually have the ability and the capability to do translation between queries that may be written in other SIEM tools and translate them into Azure Sentinel KQL, so that if you have some very bespoke, very intensive or time intensive, it took you a long time to build them is what I'm trying to say, queries in other languages, you can actually get them ported across in the most easy and the most efficient way. It is a very broad topic. I could probably talk all day on some of the challenges that customers face and some of the solutions they've come up with to actually migrate from one SIEM solution to another. But hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of two of the most significant ones and two ways which customers can overcome them.
No, that was a great answer. And just as a follow-up question, is there any publicly available tool or spreadsheet or anything like that will allow you to calculate that total cost of ownership if you wanted to go through that migration process?
Yeah, so from a total cost of ownership perspective, there's not a calculator or a tool. I believe some of the leading industry analysts, so Forrester and Gartner, are looking at total cost of ownership calculations, and there may be white papers available to that effect. I'm not sure if they're available or if they're still in progress. But in terms of working out the total cost of the actual solution, taking away the people in the process or maybe the overhead costs of running virtual machines that you don't have with Azure Sentinel, the Azure pricing calculator has the ability, if you add Azure Sentinel on there, it has a very simple calculation you can do where you add in the amount of data in gigabytes you think you're going to be ingesting per day, the amount of days that you need to be retaining the solution for, and can help you with working out what the cost is likely to be for the tooling. But that is slightly different from a total cost of ownership calculation, because obviously it doesn't take into account cost savings from not needing to run infrastructure or the overhead of people and process of actually retraining and migrating between tools.
Okay, perfect. I had one follow-up question, and it was really along the lines of in log analytics, I've seen that there is, as events and custom logs are indexed, you do get some latency. Do you get any latency in Azure Sentinel in terms of the events arriving? Are they batched up and processed and indexed? over a sliding window, or are they immediate?
So Azure Sentinel as a solution is sitting on top of log analytics. So the experience you'll get in Azure Sentinel is the same as you get with log analytics. So as those events come in, they're brought in and they're stored in log analytics, and then the Sentinel queries are run over the data that's stored on that data store. Very much think of it as a software as a service solution that runs on top of the platform as a service solution of log analytics. So the good news here is that everything that you know and love, and all of the solutions and the abilities you have with log analytics, they're all available with Azure Sentinel as well. So there is that side, but also anything that you've experienced in terms of nuances in how the log analytics platform works, they will be the same with Azure Sentinel as well.
Got you. Well, Kieran, we don't have any additional questions. Did you want to make? We're literally bang on time. We've done fantastically. Did you want to make any final comments, or you know, I know that you're happy to contact people if anybody's got any additional questions or anything like that. Please feel free to say anything.
Yeah, so I think just one thing I'll leave you with, which is a time-bound thing. We are running an offer at the moment. So right now, if you have that Microsoft 365 Defender suite in your environment, and you have E5 security licenses, then you can get 100 megabytes per user per day. Sorry, per user per month. My apologies. 100 megabytes per user per month of free raw data ingestion from your Microsoft 365 Defender tools. So Defender for endpoint raw data, Defender for Office raw data. This offer is running at the moment, is running up until the end of May. So if you were thinking about trialing Azure Sentinel and wanting to keep the cost down, and that raw data from those Microsoft 365 Defender solutions was one of the data sets you would be using, now is a great time to look at that, because for the next 5 months, you get that free 100 meg a day of ingestion, which should be more than enough for most environments, depending on your users. It does scale, obviously, 100 meg per user per month. Sorry, got to keep myself honest there, because I get used to saying gigabytes per day, whereas this is a 100 megabytes per user per month offer that we have running.
Fantastic. That sounds like a great offer for some of the audience to try and get hands on with Defender and Sentinel. So Kieran, I just want to extend my thanks for speaking. It's really happy as well that that Sentinel has had its first birthday, and it's very different from the core capability that was released when we had the initial talk. So it's great to see the cadence and development of the product, and you know, with a bit of luck, we can have you back here in a year's time to give us the 2-year update, and we'll see some more amazing improvements.
I would be more than happy, and I would love to. So thank you everyone for having me this evening.
Thanks, Kieran. Bye everybody. Thank you.